Think you know everything about Neo's red pill journey? Behind the revolutionary sci-fi masterpiece lies a treasure trove of bizarre secrets, from sushi recipes masquerading as computer code to a phone that caused actual traffic accidents, and casting choices that would have completely changed cinema history. The truth about The Matrix is stranger than the fiction it presents. Fact 1. The green code is actually sushi recipes. When you think of The Matrix, one of the first images that comes to mind is probably that mesmerizing cascade of green symbols flowing down the screen like digital rain. This iconic visual effect has become synonymous with the film and appears in the opening moments of every Matrix movie. But the truth behind those mysterious characters is far more mundane and delicious than you might imagine. The man responsible for creating this legendary code was Simon Whiteley, a production designer working at Animal Logic Studio in Australia. When the Wachowski directors first approached him about designing the Matrix code, Whiteley initially came up with a three-dimensional design where letters would click and tumble across the screen. The directors loved the concept, but felt it didn't capture the ancient, mystical feeling they wanted to bring to their futuristic story, particularly since they were heavily influenced by Japanese animation and martial arts films. This is where Whiteley's personal life became unexpectedly crucial to cinema history. His wife is Japanese, and when he needed inspiration for a new approach, he turned to the most readily available source of Japanese characters in his home, his wife's collection of cooking magazines and sushi recipe books. Whiteley spent time hand-copying Japanese katakana characters directly from these cookbooks, choosing this particular form of Japanese writing because it had clean, simple strokes that would work well on screen. As Whiteley later revealed in interviews, "I like to tell everybody that The Matrix's code is made out of Japanese sushi recipes. Without that code, there is no Matrix." He would scan the characters he had copied by hand, then digitally manipulate them to create the flowing effect that would become one of the most recognizable visual elements in modern cinema. The irony wasn't lost on Whiteley's Japanese friends, who found it hilarious that they would try to decode the Matrix by looking for sushi recipes and cooking instructions flowing down the screen. What appeared to be complex computer programming was actually just ingredients and cooking methods for Japanese cuisine, transformed into the backbone of a science fiction masterpiece. Fact 2. Will Smith would have changed everything. One of the most famous what-if stories in Hollywood history involves Will Smith turning down the role of Neo in The Matrix, but the full story reveals something even more surprising about how casting decisions were made in late 1999 Hollywood. Smith's choice didn't just affect his own career, it would have completely changed the entire dynamic of the film in ways that most people never realized. At the time, Will Smith was one of the biggest stars in the world, riding high on the success of Independence Day and Men in Black. When the Wachowski directors offered him the lead role in The Matrix, Smith was skeptical about the ambitious special effects and didn't fully understand the concept, so he chose to make Wild Wild West instead, a decision he later called one of his biggest career mistakes. Smith admitted years later that he wasn't mature enough as an actor at that time and probably would have messed up the role that Keanu Reeves made iconic. However, the most revealing part of this story came when Smith discussed what the casting would have looked like if he had accepted the role. According to Smith, if he had been cast as Neo, the studio would not have cast Lawrence Fishburne as Morpheus, because they were uncomfortable with having two black male leads in a high-concept science fiction blockbuster. Instead, the studio was considering Val Kilmer for the role of Morpheus, which would have created a completely different mentor-student dynamic between the characters. This behind-the-scenes detail exposes the unfortunate reality of Hollywood's thinking during that era, where studios apparently felt obligated to ensure that at least one of the two main male characters was white, even in a film as groundbreaking and progressive as The Matrix. Smith himself pointed out this uncomfortable truth, noting that the perfect chemistry between Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne might never have existed if the casting had gone differently. The pairing of Reeves and Fishburne became one of the most memorable mentor relationships in cinema, making Smith's decision to pass on the role accidentally beneficial for everyone involved. Fact 3. The woman in red caused real accidents? In The Matrix, there's a memorable scene where Morpheus tests Neo's awareness by having him walk through a crowded simulation only to be distracted by a stunning blonde woman in a bright red dress who turns out to be a trap set by Agent Smith. What most viewers don't know is that this character, played by actress Fiona Johnson, was so captivating that she caused actual accidents during filming, proving that her distracting power extended far beyond the fictional world of The Matrix. The woman in red was specifically designed to stand out in the film's deliberately muted color palette, which was dominated by blacks, greens, and grays to represent the artificial nature of the Matrix simulation. Her vibrant red dress was meant to catch Neo's attention and symbolize danger, but the costume design worked perhaps a little too well in real life. Fiona Johnson's striking appearance and the bold costume created such a visual impact that crew members found it genuinely difficult to concentrate on their work when she was on set. The most dramatic example of her distracting effect happened during filming, when a crew member was driving his vehicle near the set. According to behind-the-scenes reports, the driver became so mesmerized by watching Fiona Johnson that he completely lost focus on where he was going and drove his car directly under a giant roller door. The massive door came crashing down onto the roof of his vehicle with a loud bang, creating a scene that was probably more startling than anything in the actual movie. Rather than stopping to assess the damage or explain what had happened, the embarrassed driver apparently decided that the best course of action was to speed away from the scene as quickly as possible, leaving behind a dented car roof and a crew that had witnessed one of the more unusual accidents in film production history. This incident became a running joke among the production team and served as proof that the costume designers had succeeded perhaps too well in creating a character whose entire purpose was to be impossibly distracting and alluring to anyone who looked at her. Fact 4. Keanu's secret spine surgery nearly killed him. While Keanu Reeves appeared effortlessly cool and physically capable as Neo in The Matrix, the reality behind the scenes was far more dramatic and dangerous than anyone realized at the time. Just before production was set to begin, Reeves was facing a serious medical crisis that could have ended not just his involvement in the film, but potentially his ability to walk normally for the rest of his life. Reeves had been suffering from a condition where his spinal discs were fusing together, and one of the compressed discs had begun sticking to his spinal cord, creating a life-threatening situation. The condition had progressed to the point where he was experiencing paralysis in his legs and losing his sense of balance so severely that he would fall over in the shower in the mornings. Faced with this terrifying reality, Reeves underwent major back surgery to prevent permanent damage, but the timing couldn't have been worse for his upcoming role as an action hero. When physical training for The Matrix was scheduled to begin, Reeves showed up wearing a neck brace, still recovering from his operation and dealing with ongoing pain and limited mobility. The martial arts coordinator, Yuen Wu-Ping, had to completely adjust the training program to accommodate Reeves's physical limitations, focusing on punches and lighter movements while avoiding the kicks that are typically central to martial arts choreography. This medical reality directly influenced the final fight scenes in the movie, where observant viewers can notice that Neo relies heavily on punching combinations and upper body movements rather than the elaborate kicking techniques that are featured more prominently with other characters. Reeves trained intensively for 4 months despite his physical challenges, even requesting to practice on his days off. But for 2 of those 4 months, he was completely unable to perform kicks due to his recovery process. The actor kept his condition largely secret from the production team, determined not to lose the role that would become one of his most iconic performances. Fact 5. The Nokia phone was modified fiction. One of the most memorable props in The Matrix is the sleek Nokia phone that gets delivered to Neo in a FedEx envelope, which Morpheus uses to guide him through his escape from the office building. The phone became so iconic that it's still referenced in popular culture today, but what most people don't realize is that the version seen in the movie was actually a fictional creation that didn't match the real Nokia model it was based on. The phone used in the film was the Nokia 8110, which was already a distinctive device in real life thanks to its curved design that earned it the nickname Banana Phone. Released in 1996, it was one of Nokia's high-end business phones and featured a sliding cover that protected the keypad when closed. However, the real Nokia 8110 had a manual sliding mechanism that required the user to physically push the cover down to reveal the keypad and microphone. For the movie, the prop department modified the phone to include a dramatic spring-loaded mechanism that would automatically snap open with the press of a button, creating a much more futuristic and impressive effect on screen. This modification was purely for cinematic purposes and added to the high-tech atmosphere that the filmmakers wanted to create, but it meant that the phone audiences saw in theaters was essentially a fictional version of a real product. The movie's influence on technology didn't end there, though. The spring-loaded opening mechanism that was created specifically for The Matrix proved to be so popular and visually appealing that Nokia decided to incorporate this fictional feature into their actual phone designs. When Nokia released the 7110 model in 1999, they included the automatic spring-loaded slider that had been invented for the movie, essentially bringing the fictional technology from The Matrix into the real world. This created an unusual situation where a movie prop inspired real product development, allowing consumers to own phones that actually functioned the way they appeared to work in the film, complete with the satisfying snap-open action that had made the Matrix phone so memorable in the first place. Fact 6. Carrie-Anne Moss hid a serious injury. Carrie-Anne Moss's performance as Trinity in The Matrix is legendary for its combination of grace, intensity, and physicality. But what makes her achievement even more impressive is that she accomplished some of her most demanding scenes while secretly nursing a significant injury that could have ended her involvement in the film. Moss was determined to perform her own wire work and stunts throughout the movie, but an accident during filming put both her health and her career at risk. The injury occurred while Moss was shooting the iconic opening sequence where Trinity escapes from the agents by running across rooftops and through office buildings in a display of superhuman agility. During the filming of these preliminary action scenes, Moss severely twisted her ankle, creating a painful injury that would have made the extensive wire work and martial arts choreography extremely difficult to complete safely. However, rather than reporting the injury to the medical team or the directors, Moss made the risky decision to keep her condition completely secret from everyone involved in the production. Her reasoning was based on a very real fear that dominated her thinking at the time. She was convinced that if the filmmakers discovered she was injured, they would immediately recast her role with another actress who could handle the physical demands without any limitations. This fear drove Moss to push through months of filming while hiding her pain and limitation, performing the complex wire stunts and fight choreography that made Trinity such a memorable character despite the ongoing discomfort from her ankle injury. She continued to train extensively and execute the demanding physical sequences that the role required, all while maintaining the secret that she was working with a compromised ankle that should have been treated and rested. Moss only revealed the extent of her injury after filming had completely wrapped and her position in the movie was secure, finally admitting to the production team what she had been dealing with throughout the shoot. Her dedication to maintaining the secret until the very end demonstrated both her commitment to the role and the intense pressure that actors often feel to appear physically capable even when dealing with real health challenges. Fact 7. The Oracle's cookies had continuity magic. One of the most beloved scenes in The Matrix takes place in the Oracle's kitchen, where the wise and motherly character played by Gloria Foster bakes cookies while delivering cryptic advice to Neo about his destiny as the One. This warm, domestic setting provides a stark contrast to the high-tech world of The Matrix, but eagle-eyed viewers have noticed something peculiar about those freshly baked cookies that reveals an amusing continuity error hiding in plain sight. In the scene, the Oracle removes a batch of cookies from her oven and carries them over to the table where Neo is sitting, creating a cozy atmosphere that makes their philosophical conversation feel more like a visit with a favorite grandmother. When she first takes the cookies out of the oven and places them on the plate, careful observers can count exactly 4 cookies sitting there, still warm from baking and ready to be offered to her guest. However, something magical happens between camera angles that has nothing to do with the Oracle's mystical powers over the Matrix. When the camera cuts to the next shot and the Oracle extends the plate toward Neo, offering him one of her homemade treats, the number of cookies has mysteriously increased from 4 to 6 without any explanation or additional baking taking place. This continuity mistake creates the amusing impression that the Oracle possesses the ability to multiply baked goods simply by moving them from one location to another, which would certainly be a useful power to have when entertaining guests in her simulated kitchen. The error likely occurred during the filming process when multiple takes were shot with different batches of prop cookies, and the editors accidentally combined shots that featured plates with different quantities of the treats. While continuity errors are common in filmmaking due to the complex process of shooting scenes out of sequence and from multiple angles, this particular mistake stands out because it involves such a simple and countable object in a relatively quiet, intimate scene where viewers have plenty of time to notice the details of what's happening on screen. Fact 8. Hugo Weaving needed hip surgery. Hugo Weaving's portrayal of Agent Smith became one of the most iconic villain performances in science fiction cinema, but his path to creating that memorable character was much more physically demanding and painful than audiences ever realized. The intense martial arts training required for The Matrix proved to be particularly challenging for Weaving, ultimately leading to a serious injury that threatened to disrupt the entire production schedule. Like all the main actors in The Matrix, Weaving was required to undergo months of rigorous physical preparation to handle the complex fight choreography that the Wachowski directors had planned for the film. The training program was overseen by renowned martial arts coordinator Yuan Wu-Ping, who had worked on numerous Hong Kong action films and brought an authentic style of wire work and combat techniques that were new to most Hollywood productions at the time. During this intensive training process, Weaving sustained a significant hip injury that was serious enough to require surgical intervention. The exact details of how the injury occurred during training haven't been widely publicized, but the damage was severe enough that Weaving needed to undergo hip surgery to repair the problem and ensure his long-term mobility and health. This medical emergency created a major logistical challenge for the filmmakers who had carefully planned their shooting schedule around the availability of all their main actors and the complex requirements of the action sequences. Rather than recasting the role or finding a way to work around Weaving's limitations, the directors made the decision to completely restructure their filming timeline to accommodate his recovery period. The production team rescheduled all of Agent Smith's major fight scenes, including his climactic subway battle with Neo, to the very end of the shooting schedule. This gave Weaving the maximum amount of time possible to heal from his surgery and regain the physical capability needed to perform the demanding choreography that his character required. The rescheduling worked successfully, allowing Weaving to deliver the intense physical performance that made Agent Smith such a formidable and memorable antagonist in the finished film. Fact 9. Johnny Depp was almost 3 Keanu characters. In one of Hollywood's most fascinating examples of parallel casting paths, Johnny Depp came remarkably close to playing Neo in The Matrix, which would have marked the 3rd time he nearly stepped into a role that ultimately became synonymous with Keanu Reeves. This pattern of near misses between the two actors reveals an interesting behind-the-scenes story about how major casting decisions were made in Hollywood during the 1990s. The first missed connection between Depp and a future Reeves role occurred with Point Break in 1991, where Depp was considered for the part of Johnny Utah, the undercover FBI agent who infiltrates a group of bank-robbing surfers. The second near miss happened with Speed in 1994, where Depp was again in the running to play Jack Traven, the cop who must keep a bus moving above 50 miles per hour to prevent a bomb from exploding. When it came to The Matrix, the Wachowski directors actually preferred Johnny Depp as their first choice to play Neo, the computer programmer who discovers that reality is a simulation. Depp was one of the final contenders for the role and came very close to landing the part that would have completely changed the trajectory of both his career and the film itself. At the time, Depp was known more for his quirky, artistic roles in films like Edward Scissorhands and What's Eating Gilbert Grape, which would have brought a very different energy to the character of Neo. However, Warner Brothers studio executives ultimately pushed for Keanu Reeves instead, primarily because he was considered a bigger box office draw at that point in their respective careers. Reeves had already proven his action star credentials with films like Point Break and Speed, making him seem like a safer choice for a high-budget science fiction action film that needed to appeal to mainstream audiences worldwide. The irony of this casting history is that Depp's artistic sensibilities might have actually been well suited to the philosophical and surreal aspects of The Matrix, but the commercial considerations of the studio system steered the role toward Reeves, who ultimately made Neo one of his most iconic characters. Fact 10. The helicopter violated air traffic laws. One of the most thrilling sequences in The Matrix involves Neo rescuing Morpheus by piloting a helicopter through the downtown area, creating a spectacular action scene that nearly became the reason the entire production was shut down permanently. What audiences saw on screen as an exciting chase sequence was actually a logistical nightmare that put the filmmakers in direct conflict with aviation authorities and threatened to end filming before the movie could be completed. The helicopter scene required complex aerial maneuvers in urban areas that violated numerous air traffic control regulations that were in place to protect both aircraft and people on the ground. When the production team applied for the necessary permits to film the helicopter sequences, they discovered that the existing laws in New South Wales, Australia, where the movie was being shot, simply did not allow for the type of low-altitude flying and dangerous maneuvers that the scene required. The situation became so serious that aviation authorities were prepared to completely prohibit the helicopter filming, which would have forced the Wachowski directors to either find a way to rewrite a crucial action sequence or potentially relocate the entire production to a different location with more permissive aviation laws. The stakes were enormous because the helicopter rescue was integral to the plot and had already been extensively planned and budgeted as one of the film's major set pieces. Rather than abandon their vision for the scene, the production team took the extraordinary step of working directly with government officials to find a solution that would allow filming to proceed safely while still achieving the dramatic aerial shots they needed. The negotiations ultimately resulted in the state of New South Wales actually changing their aviation laws to create special provisions that would permit the specific type of controlled helicopter filming that The Matrix required. This legislative change meant that the movie literally rewrote the law books in order to exist, creating new legal precedents for future film productions that wanted to incorporate similar aerial sequences into their movies while maintaining appropriate safety standards for both cast and crew members. Fact 11. Switch was originally gender fluid. The Matrix featured a memorable crew member named Switch, played by Belinda McClory, who appeared as a tough, androgynous woman with platinum blonde hair and a no-nonsense attitude. However, the original concept for this character was far more groundbreaking and would have made The Matrix the first major Hollywood blockbuster to feature a transgender character in a meaningful role, decades before such representation became more common in mainstream cinema. In the Wachowski director's original script, Switch was designed to be male in the real world, but female inside the Matrix simulation, creating a powerful metaphor for how people might express their true identity in a virtual environment where physical limitations don't apply. This concept would have required casting two different actors to play the same character, with a male actor portraying Switch's appearance in the harsh reality of the post-apocalyptic world, and a female actor showing how Switch chose to present herself within the simulated reality of the Matrix. The character's name itself was meant to reflect this gender transition, as Switch would literally switch between male and female presentations, depending on which reality she was inhabiting at any given moment. This innovative approach to gender identity would have added another layer to the film's central theme about the difference between perceived reality and authentic truth, suggesting that the Matrix might actually allow people to express aspects of themselves that were suppressed in the physical world. Unfortunately, this progressive concept was ultimately deemed too complex or potentially controversial for a mainstream audience in 1999, and the character was simplified to be female in both realities. The decision to abandon the gender-switching element removed what could have been a pioneering moment in blockbuster filmmaking, though the character of Switch retained some of her androgynous styling and attitude that hinted at the original concept. Years later, after both Wachowski directors came out as transgender women, many critics and fans have reinterpreted various elements of the Matrix trilogy as containing coded references to transgender experiences and themes, with the original Switch concept serving as evidence of their long-standing interest in exploring gender identity through science fiction. Fact 12. The lobby scene used real explosions. The lobby shootout sequence in The Matrix is widely considered one of the greatest action scenes ever filmed, featuring Neo and Trinity methodically destroying a marble-columned government building while rescuing Morpheus from Agent Smith. What makes this scene even more impressive is that the spectacular destruction audiences witnessed was achieved using real explosives and practical effects rather than computer-generated imagery, creating genuine physical chaos that required incredible precision and timing to capture safely. The production team spent months researching the exact type of marble and stone materials that would produce the most visually dramatic shattering effect when destroyed by gunfire and explosions. They discovered that certain types of glass and stone would create expanding circular patterns when fractured, which became the signature look of the destruction throughout the lobby sequence, with debris radiating outward in perfect rings from each point of impact. To achieve this effect, the special effects team rigged the massive marble columns with concentric rings of small explosive charges that were carefully timed to detonate in sequence, creating the illusion that bullets were causing the stone to explode outward in slow-motion waves. Each column required dozens of precisely placed charges that had to be wired and tested multiple times to ensure they would fire in the correct order and create the desired visual effect without endangering the actors or crew members. The complexity and expense of this setup meant that the filmmakers essentially had only one opportunity to capture each shot correctly, since rebuilding and re-rigging the explosive effects would have been prohibitively expensive and time-consuming. This pressure created an incredibly tense filming environment where every camera angle, lighting setup, and actor movement had to be perfectly choreographed before the explosives were triggered, because there would be no second chances to get the shot right. The commitment to using practical effects rather than digital alternatives gave the lobby scene a weight and authenticity that audiences could feel, with real debris flying through the air and genuine structural destruction occurring in front of the cameras, creating an intensity that would have been difficult to achieve through computer animation alone. Fact 13. The street crowd vanished between shots. One of the most noticeable continuity errors in The Matrix occurs during the tense office building sequence where Neo receives the Nokia phone from Morpheus and is instructed to escape from the agents by climbing out onto the scaffolding. When Neo loses his grip and drops the phone from the high-rise window, the editing creates a bizarre visual inconsistency that makes an entire crowd of people appear and disappear like magic between camera angles. The sequence begins when Neo is forced to climb out of his office window and onto the construction scaffolding to avoid capture by Agent Smith and his team. As Morpheus guides him through the escape route over the phone, Neo becomes increasingly nervous about the dangerous heights and precarious footing, ultimately losing his balance and dropping the crucial communication device that was his lifeline to the outside world. When the phone first slips from Neo's hands and the camera shows the initial downward view from his perspective on the scaffolding, the street far below appears completely empty, with no pedestrians, vehicles, or activity visible on the pavement where the phone is about to land. This establishes the scene as taking place in a relatively quiet area of the city during what seems like a calm moment in the urban environment. However, when the camera cuts to show the phone actually falling through the air toward the ground, the same street has suddenly become filled with a large crowd of people, including what appears to be some kind of parade or public gathering, with numerous pedestrians walking around and filling the previously empty space. The phone falls toward this bustling scene of urban activity that wasn't visible just moments before. The continuity error becomes even more obvious when the camera cuts back to a wider establishing shot after the phone hits the ground, because the street has once again returned to being completely empty, with all the people and parade activity having mysteriously vanished without explanation. This editing mistake creates the impression that hundreds of people materialized and then disappeared in the span of a few seconds, likely the result of filming the different angles on separate days with different crowd control situations. Fact 14. Keanu gave away $24.5 million. Keanu Reeves has long been known for his generosity and humble attitude despite his massive success in Hollywood, but his actions surrounding The Matrix revealed just how extraordinary his charitable nature truly is. When the film became a global phenomenon and generated enormous profits, Reeves made financial decisions that shocked even industry insiders who were accustomed to seeing actors fight for every possible dollar from successful projects. For his starring role as Neo in The Matrix, Reeves earned $10 million up front, which was already a substantial sum for an actor at the time. However, when the film's back-end profits were calculated based on its incredible box office success, his total earnings from the movie reached $35 million, making him one of the highest-paid actors of 1999 and setting him up for financial security for the rest of his life. Rather than keeping this windfall for himself, Reeves made the remarkable decision to donate 70% of his total Matrix earnings, which amounted to $24.5 million, to leukemia research organizations. This massive charitable contribution was motivated by a deeply personal reason. His sister Kim had been battling leukemia around the time of the film's production, and Reeves wanted to use his newfound wealth to support research that might help her and other patients facing the same devastating disease. Reeves's generosity didn't end with his charitable donations, though. When it came time to film the two Matrix sequels, The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions, he continued to demonstrate his appreciation for the people who had helped make the original film such a success. Reeves gave each member of the special effects team and the costume department a bonus of $1 million from his own sequel's earnings, recognizing that their creative contributions had been essential to the groundbreaking visual impact that made The Matrix a cultural phenomenon. These acts of generosity were conducted quietly, without publicity campaigns or public announcements, reflecting Reeves's preference for keeping his charitable activities private and focusing attention on the work rather than his personal wealth. Fact 15. The actors had philosophical homework. Most actors preparing for a role might expect to study their characters' motivations, practice fight choreography, or work with dialect coaches. But the cast of The Matrix faced an unusual and intellectually demanding requirement that was unlike anything typically asked of performers in action movies. The Wachowski directors insisted that their actors needed to understand the complex philosophical and scientific concepts that formed the foundation of the film's story before they could even begin to embody their characters convincingly. Keanu Reeves discovered this unconventional approach when he was first approached about playing Neo, as the directors handed him 3 dense academic books that he was required to read completely before he would even be allowed to look at the script. The first book was a work by French philosopher Jean Baudrillard, which explored concepts about reality, simulation, and how people understand the difference between authentic experiences and artificial representations of those experiences. The second required reading was Out of Control by Kevin Kelly, which examined complex systems, evolution, and the relationship between humans and increasingly sophisticated machines and robots. This book was particularly relevant to understanding the world of The Matrix, where artificial intelligence had evolved beyond human control and created a simulated reality to contain humanity. The third book on Reeves's mandatory reading list was about evolutionary psychology, which approaches human emotions and behavior from a scientific perspective, rooted in how these traits developed over millions of years of human evolution. This academic foundation helped the actors understand how their characters might think and react in the extraordinary circumstances presented by the film's plot. The Wachowskis believed that without this philosophical background, the actors wouldn't be able to deliver the depth and authenticity that the complex themes of the movie required. This intellectual preparation extended beyond just the lead actors, as other cast members were also expected to engage with the philosophical underpinnings of the story to ensure that even smaller roles were performed with an understanding of the larger ideas that The Matrix was trying to explore about consciousness, reality, and human nature.